Hi class, my name is Martyna Michalska, and I will be doing my final presentation on Abraham Maslow and his contributions to humanistic psychology. I have always found Maslow's theories interesting, and I agree with a lot of his views and ideas. I first heard of Maslow in a philosophy class, I think in my freshman year of college, and I found him to be really an interesting individual, really different from what I previously heard about psychology. And also, I found his ideas and theories to be really applicable to my life and to psychology in general. I also like the different take that humanistic psychology took compared to psychoanalysis or behaviorism. There are some key distinguishing features of humanistic psychology which I would really like to discuss before I delve deeper into Abraham Maslow. First is the idea of personal agency or free will, which is the concept that we make our own choices in life and we must accept the consequences that go with our choices. Humanistic psychology also makes the assumption that people are generally good and have an innate need to make themselves and the world they live in a better place. Humanistic psychology believes that people are born good, and they always have this optimistic approach and view to human beings as being very capable of overcoming moments of weakness or despair. Humanistic psychology involves much qualitative research instead of quantitative, so many of the theories, the validity is often questioned because of this. You'll see this happen a lot to Maslow because of his small sample sizes. Two of the most influential humanistic psychologists, Maslow and Rogers, saw personal growth as a basic human motivator, and this is something they really had in common with many other humanistic psychologists. They truly believe that every human aspires to use their experiences and knowledge to develop intellectually and psychologically in order to improve their own lives and the lives of everyone around them. So before I start talking about Maslow's theories and his hierarchy of needs, I wanted to delve a little more into his personal life because I think it's important to mention that Abraham almost proves his own theories of self-actualization by overcoming his really depressing childhood and developing into a successful intellectual as we know him today, as we know him to be today. He was born on April 1st, 1908 in Brooklyn, New York, and he was the oldest of 7 children. His parents were poor, uneducated Jewish immigrants from Russia, and because Maslow was the only Jewish boy in his class at school or his neighborhood, he often felt ostracized from his peers and felt lonely and unhappy. His life at home was really detrimental to his childhood as well. He was constantly at odds with his father, who often degraded him and made him feel worthless. His mother showed him almost no affection, and Maslow really grew to despise her. At the young age of 17, Maslow attended the City College of New York, followed by a very short stint of a couple weeks at Brooklyn Law School simply to appease his father. He then transferred to Cornell University. During this time at Cornell, which you know from this class was a really influential school in psychology, he took a class by E.B. Titchener, and it honestly temporarily discouraged him from pursuing psychology further. He didn't agree at all with Titchener's views, and he felt that the class was, quote, awful and had nothing to do with people at all. Maslow then transferred to the University of Wisconsin, where he discovered a much different approach to psychology that he agreed with more, and he earned his PhD there in 1934. During his time there, I think it is important to note that he married his longtime love and first cousin, Bertha Goodman, on December 31st, 1928. They had 2 daughters, and they had a very good relationship. They stayed happily married until his death. Maslow continued at the University of Wisconsin as a teacher after receiving his PhD, and he later also taught at other schools such as the Brooklyn College and the Brandeis University in Massachusetts. He was elected president of the American Psychological Association in 1967, but he quit teaching shortly after in 1968 because of his failing health. Maslow died from a heart attack at the age of 62 in Menlo Park, California, while jogging. Maslow really strived to take a more optimistic approach to psychology and human motivation. A lot of his theories are very different from those of behaviorism or even Freud's theories of psychoanalysis. His theories are based on the idea of self-actualization, which the text describes as the full development of one's abilities and the realization of one's potential. He created something that I'm sure we are all familiar with, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which took on this pyramid structure and consisted of the 5 needs that he felt must be met in this certain order to reach self-actualization. The first and most crucial to human survival was the physiological needs of food, water, shelter, and sex. Maslow really felt that if your mind is preoccupied with just figuring out how to survive the day or figuring out how to survive the week, you won't be able to focus or grow, develop psychologically at all until those needs are met. And he felt like this for each and every single stage. He felt that you weren't able to ever be on the esteem level if you didn't have food or water or shelter, because you were never able to develop that high up without those things. So only once those needs are met, the human has the ability to develop further and higher, like I said, to the next needs of safety and security. He felt that it was very important for humans to have some kind of routine, just to not necessarily know your future, but to have an idea of what you're doing, have an everyday life, for example, that you felt safe in. And then after the needs of security are met, you can follow the pyramid to the needs of belongingness and love. He felt that this, especially in childhood, was very important to develop in order to then move on to the esteem needs, which is not just self-esteem, but also confidence in yourself, confidence in believing yourself, individualism, and being comfortable with who you are as a person. So finally, after all these all these four needs are met, one can eventually fulfill the last need of self-actualization. Maslow, like I said, felt very strongly about the importance of meeting the physiological, safety, belongingness, and love needs in childhood so that self-actualization can be reached later in life. This is an interesting point to mention because, as I said, his childhood was very detrimental to his development. He didn't have a very good childhood at all, and this is probably what led him to believe that this is most important and most critical to development, because it's something that he himself didn't experience. So Maslow's research was done mostly on people he considered to be psychologically healthy and free of neurosis. He considered these people to be rarely found in the population, making up only about 1%. Many of the subjects he studied, some in person and some by analyzing biographies, were middle-aged. Some of these people included Albert Einstein, George Washington Carver, and one of his personal role models, the Gestalt psychologist Max Wertheimer. The tendencies that he associated with those who fulfilled their self-actualization needs are listed in the textbook, and I think really important to note, just because they're so unique in nature. And most people do have a difficulty obtaining all or any of these tendencies. The first he stated was an objective perception of reality, then a full acceptance of their own nature and who they are as people, a commitment and dedication to some kind of work, preferably a work you're very passionate about and a work that will make a difference to your life and to the life of people around you and humanity in general. Simplicity and naturalness of behavior, not being fake or playing games with people, but really being straightforward. Also, a need for autonomy, privacy, and independence, and I think the key one here is independence. I think a lot of people struggle with this one. They feel very dependent on other people. They feel like they can't do things without help. Also, there was a need for intense mystical or peak experiences, which I think these kind of experiences he felt really led the person to believe in what they wanted to do with their lives and how they wanted to live their life. Next we move on to empathy and affection for all of humanity. Like I previously said, humanistic psychologists really believed in the good nature of humans and the need for us to help each other. Seventh was the resistance to conformity, to really standing up for yourself and believing in your own ideas, thinking outside the box, and then backing it up with basically confidence in your ideas. Also a democratic character structure, definitely thinking that people can make their own choices. Again, free will comes into play here. Also an attitude of creativeness. This is kind of where the thinking outside the box comes in as well. It's this attitude of creativeness that leads these great self-actualizers to their final stage. The idea of being different from everyone and not being afraid to be creative definitely helped in their development. And lastly, a high degree of social interest, which again is something that humanistic psychologists felt was important. Just, being one with society, trying to help society, and being interested in the overall well-being of society. And like I said, while many psychologists still find Maslow's theories very true, there is a lot of criticism in his work. His subject size was very small, and it really wasn't sufficient enough to validate the generalizations he made about self-actualized people. Maslow did understand this, and he did agree with this, and he almost found this to be inevitable because he believed there was such a small amount of people that actually reached the stage. But nonetheless, many people still find his work very helpful in solving everyday problems, and his theories still live on very much so in modern psychology. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to the whole thing, and I hope you understand more about Maslow and you find him as interesting as I do. Thank you.